Well, welcome everyone. Once again, this is somehow November is here. So welcome to the November 1st City of Bend Utilities Public Advisory Group meeting. I'm Aubrey, supporting the city team, and familiar faces on the line today. We have Lori Fea, we have Dan Denning, we have Elizabeth O'Keefe, all from the city side. And welcome to all the members who are back here with us on Zoom. We've got a fun, lots of discussion planned for today, so we'll keep it lively. Just gonna flip ahead here to our agenda, send out a preview of our discussion questions yesterday with the agenda, but just setting the tone for the purpose, we're gonna spend kind of the first hour-ish probably in Dan's space on water conservation. Lots of questions to ask you guys, wanna get your feedback along the way. And then towards the last half hour, we're going to get an update on the stormwater management side from Elizabeth. So that's what we have in store. And we'll see if this works. I did sneak in, since we didn't get a chance to play these two little TV spots. I have them on the screen and I can play maybe one of them here for us today if we have a chance. But before diving into new content, just wanted to look back to our October meeting. And a couple of things, curious if anybody had any further reflections after that discussion, but a couple of things that we talked about. We heard from Dan some of the statistics, the highlights from work that happened this summer with the water conservation side, the rebate applications, the water waste cases, the sprinkler inspections that happened. We also heard a little bit, saw some of the examples of the new types of outreach that the city has added to that side. No one on the line had seen the billboards in town, but those were some of the new materials, plus these little video clips that I have, and hope to play one here today for us. We also talked a little bit about the challenges of connecting with some of the different customer classes, the multifamily, just because it's who the point person or accountable person can be, who can make those decisions, and is on site, gets a little bit complex with that particular customer class. And then talked a bit about outreach to the landscape contractors and green industry. I think we had some ideas from the team here with HOAs, kind of the welcome basket that goes out to new residents might be a place to sneak in some literature. Heard a little bit about how the point of sale information at box stores and other places has been really effective in other situations. And then we also had that Chapter 12 language for the specs and standards that was in our agenda packet. Anything from the group, I guess, that, thinking back to October, something fresh, inspiration, insight that happened in that month, something else that we talked about that you wanted to highlight as a takeaway?
I might note that Dan and I have been busy talking to COBA, the home builders. We've gone to them a couple of times to talk about the Chapter 12 stuff, the no grass in the right of way discussion. I don't know if Dan wants to jump in on that, but I feel like we basically heard, okay, I have a saying on my whiteboard. It's like, everybody likes progress, but nobody likes change. So there was definitely a little bit of we don't really want to do something different, but we didn't get a lot of pushback. There's concerns about cost to change from the typical right-of-way landscaping over to something a little bit different. And we are cognizant of that and putting information together and trying to make things easier. But I just wanted to let folks know that we have made 2 contacts with COBA to kind of see how they're feeling about that. And we plan to talk to City Council in December to give them a heads up about progressing on these changes in the right-of-way. And I don't know, Dan, if I'm jumping on your parade there.
No, that's fine. I was just looking for some of my notes to grab real quick from those meetings so I could kind of share if we got time to talk about that. But yeah, I think obviously you're bringing something new to the table. Not everybody's familiar with the Chapter 12, especially because we haven't been implementing that in private development. So first off, it was just kind of setting the stage of here's what it is. It's not a new code change. These are standards specific to the right of way. So not a bunch of new language. Obviously we're clarifying things and refining some of that language so it's clear what we're asking. And so it fits with this, proposed path for this right-of-way permit, this free right-of-way permit that we're gonna be issuing. And so yeah, for some folks, I think the initial knee-jerk reaction was like, whoa, you're taking away turf. That's kind of our business model, and that's what we think homeowners like to see. And so we're talking about non-functional turf, specifically in the right-of-way. We're not talking about front yards. We've talked about that, some of our conservation measures, that we outlined in our WMCP were for private landscape code, which we're not addressing yet, right? We need to start with the right-of-way and work our way back. So there's still time for discussion on all these things, but yeah, some of the feedback we got was expected. Obviously, plant availability was a concern if we're asking, to install things other than turf grass, which is pretty readily available. Access to the plant sizes that we're requesting, sometimes it's hard to find, 2-inch caliper trees that we ask for with our approved street tree list. So these things are things that we're working on in the background with local nurseries and with the extension and things like that, but obvious concerns for some folks. And then I think it was Justin Perkey brought up another one that was interesting because we have an approved contractors list for the right-of-way. So who can do construction in the right-of-way. And, his concerns were, is that going to be a barrier to us doing work in the right-of-way? And, so that's something all these comments we're bringing back to our internal group and following up on. We don't think it's going to be a barrier. These right-of-ways are going in anyway. We're just asking it to be done in a more, regionally appropriate manner. But any comments from the group? Is this pretty consistent with what you'd expect from the development community, or are there any other thoughts on what we're trying to do here with that permit? I know, Wes, you actually have some specific examples, right? Possibly
Right.
On one of your current projects.
Yeah, but you're talking Bend High, or are we
Yeah.
talking? Yeah,
Yeah.
that's still being vetted and worked through. But we have met with our landscape architect. Actually, you were there, correct?
Yep.
And
Yep.
we've discussed all this. So we are trying to follow your model and ours to make this happen. We got quite a stretch of 9th Street. It's going to be redeveloped, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, so at this point, I think we'll touch on some of the templates and share some of that with you too. We're still in development right now. I think we're at the point where we kind of like our planting schematic and plant palette. And we're working on, the next phase of that is how to irrigate it consistent with our standards. And so there's obviously still room for input from this group. If you see something today that you comes to mind or that you think would be a challenge, please bring those things up today. I don't mind talking to you guys all the time, but I'm sure you'd like me to be quiet once in a while too. And I'd love to hear, from the group, your thoughts. That's the whole point of this meeting. So I think I'm good unless anybody has any comments. Aubrey, you can keep moving through.
Great. All right. I am going to just give a little teaser and see if the sound comes through for
Water
folks.
connects our Bend community.
Everybody hear that? Okay, great. Okay, I'll just do one of these, I think.
Summer is peak season for water usage in Central Oregon. Luckily, the City of Bend offers a variety of rebates on indoor and outdoor water-efficient devices to help you save water and money, like $100 on a smart irrigation controller or $80 on a high-efficiency toilet. Learn more at waterwisetips.org and help us beat the peak this summer.
So there's a little flavor of what those were like. Did anybody come across those in your daily lives? Lori did. I think Joe, did you say yes? No, okay. So just a couple. So that's kind of a flavor of some of the
You guys don't
materials that
watch
we know.
TV enough.
So that's a true statement. I mean, these are I specifically was looking out for them, right? So we did our media buys, and I'm going, okay, I'm going to expect to see these playing in the morning news hours, and you know, of course, they never give you a specific time until after they played it, of when they played it. But you know, that's one of the things we were trying to pursue this summer, was like the increased awareness, because we had directives to move towards like regulatory enforcement. And we realized that, you know, people weren't reading code, or maybe even aware of it, or, you know, we needed more communication. I think our communications person said you have to hit someone with information 80 times before it sinks in. It takes that many visualizations or auditory reminders before someone remembers what you're trying to tell them. And so, you know, we didn't have that much money to spend on TV to hit every person 80 times. But we were hoping to just that it would get out, and we'd buy some good airtime and get the message out. So the first video we watched was a rebate promotion, and the second one is about our code here in Bend. Just trying to, you know, preemptively and proactively, I should say, raise awareness before, you know, we start talking about fines with people or code enforcement and those sorts of things. And then just, you know, raising the awareness of the rebate programs that we have, because it's something new, and really just trying to saturate the audience. But what we found is, you know, we did a survey in the beginning of the season, a communications and awareness survey, and we're actually going to send out the post survey here today to try to just gauge what people know about their water system, where they're getting their information. Are they aware of our program? Are they aware of why we have a program here in Bend, et cetera? And kind of tease out, you know, what kind of rebates would you like to see from the city of Bend and things like that. And I believe we shared some of that initial feedback at one of our meetings last year. So I'm happy to revisit that. And we're trying to measure kind of a pre and post change in awareness, and see, you know, do we want to keep pursuing this type of media, or is it better off? I mean, if no one saw the billboards, I mean, no one saw the TV ads, you know, maybe we need to pivot, or maybe we just need to be putting that information out there longer, right? It was only up May through September. So that's a busy time for folks. You know, maybe people are more receptive or looking out for this type of stuff in the winter. I don't know. So more to come on that. But
and this fits into one of the questions that we're interested in getting your input on today too, just to kind of think about, you know, what the priorities could be moving forward. If there's some pivots or some continuation, that would be helpful. It's probably going to try to play these videos again, so forgive me if the sound comes through a little crazy until I get to the next slide here. All right, so Water Conservation Program mentioned, we have a stack of discussion questions here for you today. I'm going to just preview these. These were in the agenda as well. There's kind of 4 areas that we wanted to touch on. So the first thing, I think folks on the line today, Molly and Tom, maybe you guys had mentioned the idea of a certification of some sort or some training for green industry folks. And we wanted to come back to that question and ask for the group's input again. We also had a question that came up in our October meeting that we wanted to circle back to, which is kind of around this, you know, single family residential has been a focus area, but if the new development that's going in the city service area is a different kind or less of that single family residential, do we want to continue or pivot? So more on that as we get into today's conversation. And then we wanted to ask you guys, kind of thinking about all the data discussed in 2023 with this group, all the information shared today, you know, where would you suggest priorities? And we have a little survey activity question for that. And then the last 2 are on the landscape design templates to get some input there. So lots to talk about today. Dan, do you want to kick us off?
sure. So just a revisit. We are ending our outdoor rebate section of our program for the season. So we'll still continue with our indoor rebates throughout the winter, and then start up our outdoor rebates again in spring. But now that we had some October data, I just wanted to revisit that and share that with you. So all in all, this season between May and October, we processed 103 approved rebate applications. And over the 2-year pilot program, which was basically 2 summer seasons, May through October, we processed 161. So definitely saw an increase in participation this year, which was good. So we're hoping some of that outreach got to folks, or some of that communication, heightened communication worked. But we'd like to find out, what they were listening to, or what how they heard about it, I should say.
Hey, Dan.
Yes, sir.
Are you still accepting outdoor rebates? Because I have not submitted ours yet.
I know, Wes. Melissa and I were talking about it. Yeah, we can talk offline.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. I'll get with you on that.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, we're stopping the promotion and trying not to take any more. And the reason being is because we have a post-inspection component of that. And obviously if the irrigation system's turned off, the controller won't be programmed to run, or the devices they're installing, we won't be able to test to make sure there was an improvement in efficiency. So
right. Well, I'm talking to Kenwood
Yep.
one. So,
I know which one you're talking about. Yep.
So
yeah, we can chat.
I'll visit with you. Thanks.
Okay. And then so here you can kind of see the distribution of the customer classes. So we had rebates open to our multifamily, some commercial, and single family residential customers. And so, single family residential outdoor continued to be a leader for a second year in a row. This was the first year we offered indoor rebates for single family residential. And we've still got 2 outliers that just haven't gotten back to us. So we've got 2 pending applications that are not included in that approved number. Any questions about rebates?
All right.
Okay. So obviously we want to grow those numbers going forward and scale those programs up. So that's discussion with our team and with this group throughout the winter as we prepare for spring. I think the next piece, as we're rolling out these rebates, we're asking people to install, more, I don't want to say advanced, like technology reliant devices in some cases, new devices in some cases, that maybe perform a little bit different than the standard equipment that goes in landscapes. And so there is a lot of data to share on that, and a lot of education that needs to go along with that for some users. Again, just like people don't read code, not everybody follows the latest irrigation trends. And I swear Rainbird and Hunter come out with a new type of or new model of controller like every year or 2. And so keeping on top of the technology is really difficult. And so, we're in the field collecting the data, seeing what's working, and staying abreast of those things. But how do we translate all that and all the potential options to the customer? And so one of the things we want to rely on is, the green industry themselves to be talking to their customers about that. And so, what types of organization, or what types of training do you think would be beneficial? Obviously like low cost, the right time of year, right, when we're not mid-season. But we've tried various different things, from workshops to tailgate meetings to just visiting businesses at their shop and telling them what we do and what we're how can we collaborate and those sorts of things. But the certified contractor was brought up. Some of those certifications can be expensive to participate in, to take the test. And then there's maintaining your certification and required hours. So we've got some ideas on that, but we'd love to hear your feedback about that. And if having a certified contractor list and the free advertisement, if you did participate in one of these classes, would that be enough of an incentive to keep an irrigator on your staff or on your team coming to these classes? And then we know we're going to need supporting documentation to accompany the templates, because we're asking for something new. We want to make sure that people are clear about what we expect and what we're going to be looking at when we do the inspections and the review of these right-of-ways landscapes. So obviously, you know, supplying and putting together irrigation BMPs for the install to accompany the plans, the supporting documentation like the substitution plant lists. Again, you know, getting back to the availability and making sure that, you know, we're not subbing in inappropriate plants. And then, you know, basic xeriscaping principles. I mean, a lot, you hear the term xeriscaping thrown out a lot. And, you know, even some of these native landscapes in these urban areas, we feel do a little bit better with supplemental water, especially in drought years, just to outcompete weeds and you know, keep a healthy stand of plants. But definitely, you know, our moderate to low water use plants, irrigation is a necessity here in the city of Bend. And so really talking about kind of like the holistic approach of, you know, how soil amendment plays into water holding capacity and, you know, infiltration and the healthy biomes under the ground and why those things are important to practice. So these are some ideas that, you know, we're thinking about, but would love to get your feedback on that as well. Or even if anyone's interested in contributing to that as we put those things together. You know, we're trying to work with the local folks at nurseries and the extension and other people to put those things together. So would love to get your feedback on that if anyone's interested. Next slide. Or any comments, really, or thoughts before we go into the next part?
Dan, I have one on your training. Maybe something to include would be what an appropriate establishment period is for native landscape. A lot of people assume that they put it in day one, they just turn it off and they never have to water it. A lot of dieback, a lot of failures happen for that reason. So
Okay.
Part of your soil prep and plant install and all that is, you know, what establishment requirements will be, and then what the payoff is after that establishment period. That's kind of where the money and the resources are recuperated.
Okay.
So Joe, that makes me wonder, it's an interesting comment, is should some of our training be then targeted to the end users as well somehow of how they manage these landscapes over the long run?
Well, I mean, something as simple as a pamphlet that when, you know, say there's an approved landscaper that does the work or a provider, you guys might have some resources that can just get passed on to them as like, hey, here's our handoff documentation. Here's what you expect, you know, what you should expect for watering for the first 6, 12, 18 months. And then kind of the taper off where once it's established, it can go to, you know, not zero water, but it can go pretty close to that, but not zero day one. So yeah, I think the end user should be involved, but it may not have to be like full on training for them.
Sure.
Maybe something more simple.
Thanks.
One of the things we were thinking, you know, especially for like a bigger development that maybe has a master controller or something like that, or controls a big common area. I don't know how feasible it would be to do the individual homes, but have that pre and post establishment schedule already set in the controller. So when they leave and a maintenance company comes in, they kind of at least have a reference of like where stations are laid out. I don't know if that could include a map, but just, you know, setting them up for success. Cause I think, you know, it's a challenge for some maintenance companies to wrap their heads around things, or they're left with things at different stages of performance or what have you. But I don't know if that would be something that you think would help along with that kind of handoff document of just like, here's the intent of this landscape. Here's our best suggestions to keep it that way, kind of thing.
Yeah, Dan, I got one thing to add to that.
Okay.
It's almost like noxious weed identification, because that's one of the hard things on that maintenance is that, you know, well, it grew, it was natural, you know, it's like, yeah, but it's knapweed. So, you know, kind of part of that, you know, that pamphlet that they might get handed off with that might, you know, go through establishment and whatnot, but to provide some kind of link to identifying the, you know, the desirables versus the noxious weeds in there, and like who do we want to help, maintain here and who is not our friend here.
Sure.
That's a big thing on that maintenance and establishment. Because once they're big and established, you can kind of tell, but when everybody's a baby plant, that's the most difficult part of that establishment, I think.
Sure.
So
do you think, I know like a lot of crews have a licensed applicator. Do you think that would be something that maybe could be offered even to that group in like continued education of like, you've got your license, you're looking for things to spray, and here's like, we found, especially with natives that were like reseeding, were like the hardest ones to tell apart, right? Because they come out in that little rosette and they're like, well, I don't know if that's like basal part of knapweed or what is that thing, right? And
right.
I don't know, do you think that could be worked in there at all?
I don't know, that's really tough because those licensed applicators, they're putting down herbicide, and a lot of people that are going after the native landscapes
Sure.
aren't into the herbicide side of things. So it's too bad that their weed identification knowledge can't be utilized in the more natural landscapes, because if you teach them how to spray stuff, they want to spray it. They don't want to hand pull it,
Right.
So, but yeah, I think you're onto something there, because that individual would have that knowledge that could help kind of cross the, bridge the gap there. Yeah.
No, yeah, I mean, it's a double-edged sword. I was thinking, maybe if there's like an established, framework for presenting that, it could be easy to just pull something together. But no, good point. I mean,
yeah,
we're just gonna have to figure out what we're looking for, long term, and these are all financial and logistical hurdles to.
So Dan, this makes me wonder, I'm gonna pick on Bronwyn, like, what do you guys do for train? Do you do all your own maintenance? Do you do any hire out? And what do you do for training?
I can only speak to it a little bit since I'm not on the maintenance side, but we do pretty much all of ours in-house, and they do trainings as well. So it's all kind of internalized. And I believe that some of our staff works with you all on some things as well in terms of that. Dan, you mentioned like the water, like irrigation efficiency or the water side of it, correct?
Yeah, so we work with Mike on a lot of the irrigation management stuff. But yeah, I know he did put together kind of their own maintenance specs. So he's got kind of outlined their fertilizer and cultural practice schedule. But I think they contract out any of the weed spraying or stuff like that.
We do some of it in-house too with our
that?
natural resources, and we've got
Oh, okay.
I think it's at Holland's Head is where we're doing a test site with like no herbicides, because we get that a lot. Like, we get a lot of complaints about so we're kind of trying to figure out like what the balance is, because, we have so much land that we are stewarding, and beyond the, kind of even the actual landscape side. So that's ongoing, but I could definitely connect you with some folks like in our natural resources department, and I'm sure Mike has some, resources on the landscape side as well, but we try to do a lot of it in-house.
Okay. I wonder if that's a possibility of like a collaborative kind of training effort then.
Yeah.
If you guys are going to put that on, and maybe we can help sponsor.
I think in general, like the more areas we're able to collaborate in, whether it's Parks and Rec or like other service providers, or, like the better, because then we're all having a consistent message, and, like kind of sharing our resources versus each trying to reinvent the wheel and do it on our own. So I think we would be happy to collaborate for sure.
Yeah, Bronwyn, that's something that stormwater program would also be very interested in collaborating with BPRD, any kind of pesticide management and application practices or trainings. I'm also going to be getting involved with the Deschutes County Weed Advisory Board soon. So that's another kind of area where we could do some outreach and collaborate a bit. I don't know if anyone from BPRD is on that committee, but
I'm not sure. I'll ask. But yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah.
And actually, since I was talking, I had one other thing that came to mind when we were talking earlier, and you might have already like kind of covered this, but when you're talking about kind of like on the like contractor side with the certifications, or, you know, I don't know, you know, if you have a way to like make a period where like if you roll it out, you heavily subsidize the cost for the training, like in that first year, first period, where it kind of incentivizes folks to take it then, or it's like, you know, they have like maybe a discount on their, you know, any ongoing education that they have to maintain. So something that like, you know, might bring in a little more revenue as folks join, but like a way to incentivize more folks to begin with.
Yeah, no, that's a good suggestion, because I think that is a barrier for a lot of folks when you're looking at, you know, a $250 test plus a $250 class, and then, you know, the ongoing maintenance of that is definitely something to consider too. Especially if you have multiple people on your crew pursuing it, then it can be a lot of overhead. So yeah, definitely something we're open to. I think we tried.
Yeah, I was like, didn't the city, along with, it was
Yeah.
Ewing and the Irrigation Association, you did the landscape irrigation auditors.
Yep.
There was a big class that was at the
Yep.
Parks and Rec building, the kayaks.
That was a few years ago. Yeah, we had.
Oh, that might have been like a decade ago now, though. But,
yeah, we did one, I think in like 2017 or 18 at COCC, and then we did another one in the past.
But the turnout was always so good. It seemed like that there was some kind of subsidy and like a kind of an incentive to take it while it was being offered. That's a great idea, I think.
You know, I think one of the things that we learned from that was a lot of people took part of the class, but they didn't take the test. So they went to the class but didn't get the certification. And
but is that still, though, there wasn't an opportunity to take the test? Didn't you have to go somewhere or do some extra step, like, again, to try to make it as easy as possible?
Well, that's where we had we actually, I think, paid a lot of money for that option, because we had the IA trainer come out to COCC. Yeah. And I mean, so it was still, I think there was still a cost associated with it.
But if we could like show them, though, that it's like, hey, if you take this, then you get your EPA water sense endorsement. And now you guys, you know, at the city, with all your branding and that commercial, you have the EPA water sense logo in there a bunch of times. And, you know, who's the contractors that are on that list? There's only one, and she's not doing all the work, you know, like, so to show them where they're gonna, you know, benefit from that. Because I've been using that, you know, I can use that logo in my advertisement, and I've had a few contractors say, hey, how'd you get that? And I told them, and they're like, oh man, but that sounds like a lot of work. And I'm like, I know it was, but, you know, so it seems like they're seeing it. If you can kind of show them why they're going to want it and how they'll benefit from it. I think, I mean, more and more how the landscapes are going around here, the contractors are going to want to do it. You just got to make it easier for them. I don't know.
Yeah. No, agreed. I mean, there's got to be the justification for it, right? There's got to be a reason you want to go through all that. So,
right.
Yeah, I think we can build that. I think we can build that. Great suggestions, though. Yeah. I think that could definitely be part of our contractor training efforts or budget, you know, is to put something on like that. And especially if there's collaboration opportunities, that's even better. Because I think that does solidify that, hey, it's not just Dan talking at you again. It's the whole city. It's all these organizations. The community as a whole is looking at it.
Okay. All right. I pulled the presentation back up on the screen. Thank you guys for that. We touched on this topic a couple times and wanted to get just this kind of input. So thanks for circling back to it. Dan, do you want to move us into the next topic section?
Sure. So last month we kind of posed the question to folks about you know, the consideration. Should we take into consideration you know, our directive from our WMCP, or one of them, was, to pursue a private development code for landscape. And
Dan, maybe remind folks what WMCP is.
It's our water management and conservation plan. So this is our regulatory document that we have to follow as a utility and as a conservation program. So it's what we report on to the state about what we're doing as a city for conservation. And so we have already pivoted and focused on the right of way, again, trying to work our way in from the street. But with that looming on the horizon for us, pursuing that measure and that directive, we're looking at things now as we prepare to evolve our program and possibly tackle that. So I pulled some information from our latest growth management. It's a draft study right now, but I was able to get some metrics that we're looking at and the trends we're seeing. And so that first graph in blue on the left was just the annual building permits issued in the City of Bend water service area. And you'll notice that a majority of those, the 58%, were issued for single family residential homes. And the point of showing you this is we're seeing a change in building type. And we're looking at, the applicability of private development code. Again, our WMCP's goal of all those measures and directives is to reduce water demands so that we don't have to add new infrastructure. And because in some cases we possibly can't in the future. So again, using conservation as a tool to reduce our demands, or at least curb our demands a little bit. And so we're looking at the effectiveness of private development code in the future. And so that middle graph there is the approved master plan developments that are going to be within the City of Bend service territory. So they'll be in the UGB, but will they be, will savings there benefit our goals of reducing water demands on the city's water system? And you can see that only 27% of them are going to be on our water service.
So to be clear, this is estimating 20 years forward, and we're saying most of the development is going to occur basically in Avion territory, not in areas serviced by City of Bend water.
Correct.
Yeah.
So these are all kind of the surrounding outlying areas of Bend where most of these big developments are going in. And so, the impact has just shrunk a little bit, right? Or the potential impact of that code. And then the last graph on the right is those same approved developments and what type of housing is going to go in. So that of that 27% that's going in within our water service area, what type of developments are going in? And single family residential is now only 18% of that. So a reduction of 40%. And then you can see that multifamily housing has grown to be the majority. And then middle housing are like duplexes and multiplexes and any of the single family residential subdivision through the new land use laws. So
this is really interesting to scratch your head about, right? Because it's not like we don't care about how much water is being used in the I shouldn't say Avion, in the franchisee areas of the city, but we're not providing them with water. They have their own sources of water. So they have their own groundwater permits basically. And our plan is about water that Bend is providing from both surface water up in the mountains and groundwater. And so it's an interesting discussion of where should we put our ratepayers' money towards on these things.
Yeah, so to even make that more complicated, we're considering things like long-term, if these new groundwater rules, when they go into place, will Avion ever need our help and ask for these developments to be switched over to our water anyway? Right. So there's all these theoretical things that maybe it's better to spend our resources to pursue it anyway. But in the meantime, in the near future, we're trying to make a decision because our timeline is within this 20-year period of what we have set aside to implement these new measures and directives. And we can always, you know, reprioritize things, but this is kind of the question we're going to get to here. Next slide real quick, Aubrey. So diving in even a little bit deeper. So, you know, now we know that, you know, 70% of our new development is going to be in multifamily. And we're talking about private development landscape code. Currently in our multifamily customers, they only use about 31% of their water outdoors. Obviously, bigger building footprints, a lot more indoor use packed with units versus a single family residential home that has more yard space and area. So again, talking about, well, now what is that savings that we measured, or that impact that we measured of this code actually going to produce for us based off these changing trends? So all in all together, so one of the other things we're thinking, and as we're thinking through this, is we're thinking, is it more realistic to go on and use these resources and refocus these resources on the existing landscape and doing retrofits? And so I pulled some stats from data we have on single family residential, about 2,900 acres of landscape in Bend service area for single family residential homes, and about 1,300 of that is lawn. So, you know, we're dealing with, you know, 1,300 acres of potential turf retrofits, and thinking about, you know, where do we start with that? If we wanted to start in the street strip or the thin strip in between the sidewalk and the curb, you know, that's typically about 10% of single family residential landscaped area. So next slide. One more. There you go. And so when we're looking at, you know, that 1,300 square feet of turf in the landscape, let's start with the blue box there on the right. So that's an annual plant water need of about 859 million gallons of water. That's just based off of plant water need. That doesn't account for irrigation efficiency. What we're seeing based off of water use is that plant's managed at about a 50% efficiency to about a billion gallons, 1.7 billion gallons of water, right? So plant water need versus what's actually going down on that acreage of turf. So if we look at just that 10% in the street strip, that's that little purple bar, that's our gallons of water needed. If we take 10% of that 1,300 acres, the assumptions made in our conservation planning document were, when we're putting in numbers of assumed savings for these different measures, based off of some turf retrofit studies, well, actually quite a few that are done throughout the Western Range, they saw about 26% savings when turf was retrofitted to different types of more xeric plant material. And so they used that savings number both in our turf rebate analysis as well as in our landscape code analysis. So basically they were assuming that in this new landscape private development code, we would just be doing things other than other than turf grass, cool season turf. So interesting similarity there. So what I'm looking at here is based on that 26% savings of our total water used for those street strips, we could potentially save about 44 million gallons of water with a turf if we were able to retrofit all those street strips in single family residential homes in Bend. So we're doing this just to take an internal look at, like, okay, if we did pivot, what is the impacts to our water savings, our projected water savings, if we do this program versus this program? I know that was a lot of information really fast, but any thoughts come to mind? And so we're not trying to justify this. We're just trying to throw out information and say, hey, this is what we're thinking about. Thoughts from the group on direction or you know, what you've seen here.
Aubrey, can you go back to that diagram?
Yeah.
So Dan, let me try to say what you said. So, because you're right, this is a lot to think about. So the blue on the upper right is what non-right of way, so people's private yards should use supposedly for water, but the green on the left is what they're really using because they're putting too much water on it.
Mhm.
Did I get those two right?
Yeah, and it's not them doing it, it's the irrigation efficiency, right? So.
Well, I know, but people are putting those
Yeah.
numbers in and making so people are in essence putting double the amount of water down than what the plants in their yard really need. That's what the big boxes are saying.
Correct.
And then in the bottom right, the purple is what people are actually irrigating in the right of way, and the green is how much we think we could chop off of that.
Right, so using the potential savings from a turf that we measured from a turf retrofit, that
Okay,
would be the savings for that that right of way area.
thank you. I needed to I need to make sure I understood. So I don't know. Hopefully that helped people, or at least to help me.
There's a
And-
fair
And to
amount.
clarify, the reason we looked at that was we thought that the right of way might be a good place to start, right? It's usually underutilized. It's you know, as the buzzword now is non-functional, but basically it's underutilized portions of our yard with a very high water need. And so we thought most people would be more willing to sacrifice that and try something different there versus their front yard where they might tend to use that for recreation or just aesthetics more, right?
I think the kind of the savings, and looking at the math on that and saying if they were to save a quarter roughly percentage of water by getting rid of the street strip, I mean, what's an average water bill in Bend? Is it a couple $100 a month?
Just water itself, I think for, shit, I had the number on my whiteboard. It's, for single family residential for our average lots, I think it's around like 70 to 100 something bucks. Yeah.
I mean, even if it was on a high number, I mean, I did math at $200 a month if you had that just on water, which might be super high on single family. But I mean, if you were to convert a street strip of 800 feet, I mean, it's going to take you, 8 to 10 years roughly to balance that savings from the retrofit, because it's at roughly $5-6 to pull something out, replant it. That I'm using round numbers here, but that's what we've seen. So I think if there was, I mean, it's hard, I guess, that the selling of that savings to the customer, because they're watering 8 to 9 months a year, roughly. The other parts of the year are off. So I guess that's a challenge to consider as well. How to offset that cost of you're saving the environment, but it's costing you $4,000 to take it out, and you're going to save a couple $100 a year, or maybe more.
Sure. So that's where the incentive comes in, Joe, is like, if we're paying $2 to $3 a square foot to take it out, that's roughly half of what you've got as the installation cost, right? So it's less to recoup, but that's one of the challenges, with having cheap water too. And the reality is that probably won't stay cheap forever. But when we're talking ROI, that's why these incentives are here, because we got to get people over that fence or off that fence of, not only is it, something that's good for the community and you should do it or consider it if you can, but hey, we're willing to help move that along for you. But yeah, no, that's good math. I see a couple hands up. Austin?
Yeah, Dan, you actually just touched on it right there at the end. Cheap water right now may not be that cheap in the long run. So yeah, that 10 year buyback may not exactly look like that. And that's a current conversation right now. Like the water system master plan identified, a series of rate increases that once COVID happened were not implemented that way. So that's a current conversation right now of just, what that strategy is going to be. I think, so just, I guess, something else to include in that kind of like financial evaluation where it may actually be a little more, feasible or impactful. You made the statement.
No, that's the hard part though. To your point, Austin, is like, we know it's likely going to increase, but to what extent? It's hard to forecast that. So it's hard to say, it's hard to include that in the calculation of and say anything other than, yeah, it's probably going to get more expensive, right? Because we need to measure that and find out. And traditionally, you know, we haven't ever increased water more than like 2 or 3% at a time, right? I think is as far as rate increase, I don't think we've ever gone higher than that. But if circumstances demand, again, unknown future influences or variables that come up, it could be different. Molly, it looked like you wanted to say something. No? Okay.
Any other?
A quick start, if no one else has got it, a quick follow-up for Joe. So in that, we've got a range of estimates from folks about what that would cost, the retrofit costs. When you're basing those, the $5 to $6 you mentioned, is that irrigation and plants? Are you converting to drip, or what type of conversion is that typically?
Well, yeah, you say you remove the sod, you're like $1.50 a square foot to pull sod out, haul it away, and then you've got to, you know, convert the irrigation, which is, you know, it could be simple as a couple $100 of materials and, you know, half day of labor, but, you know, then you got another little bit of there, and then you plant it depending on the type of plant you use. But, you know, a typical landscape, you know, planting and irrigation is quite a bit more expensive than sod. So, and then you know, what are you going to put as a mulch? Are you going to do rock, or are you going to do, you know, then there's another, you know, $500-600 by the time you get it there, you spread it, you know, people want to do, you know, whatever mulch they want to do. It's still, you know, that those small little areas are expensive to go up. Now you get that payback as time goes by, but you know, depending on the extent of which they re-landscape it to, you're still looking, if you had a $3 rebate, I mean, that does cover, they could do something real basic. But you know, then it does incentivize them to say, hey, that kind of offsets that, you know, subsidy would be helpful. They could probably get it within there, but let's say they want to do a few more boulders and they want something a little decorative. That of course that does drive the cost up, but you know, the longest lasting materials like rock and, you know, the hardiest plants are generally more expensive right up front, and that's what people see. That's the dollar amount they put in their budget.
Yep. Okay. No, I'm tracking. I think something that we don't have for today, but is coming up, is when we get we'll talk a little bit about the templates, is putting that cost analysis together and the irrigation plans. Because one of the other things we've heard is, you know, my guys aren't, you know, real savvy on installing drip, and so that's a hurdle, right? You know, it's more time or labor to install that versus these guys install, you know, overhead irrigation night and day. We can run pipe, we can put heads in, no problem. So, you know, maybe that's something, again, if it's helpful, you know, some of those contractor trainings could be those irrigation best management practices of like, here's what we're looking for, here's your drip basics, or here's, you know, your quick 10 drip tips. I'm trying to think of what else. Maybe that's where we could, you know, talk through the expectations of the turf removal program, so they know what we're getting into, right? Or that provides more talk on realistic costs, right? What's that price point going to be for that rebate based off of that feedback back for those projects? Good stuff, though. Good stuff.
All
We
right.
probably need to move, right?
I am going to suggest, so welcome Amy and Ryan. I know you guys stepped into a rather complex question here. We're chatting a bit on one of our focus areas. Dan and Elizabeth, I'm going to suggest, just since we're getting lots of great feedback, maybe Dan, we take the where to invest question offline, since it is a survey, and we could do it as a follow-up to this meeting, and we could give you a chance to share some of the draft landscape plan concepts and get the group's input. Does that sound good? We might borrow 5 minutes from your time here to Elizabeth. Should
we just preface that survey question real quick?
Yes, let's do that.
So what we're going to ask folks is, we got a quick Survey Monkey survey for you to take, of just based off of what you're hearing today, how would you split $100 of investment into these different categories of either outreach or incentives or standards, et cetera. And we're just interested to hear, your thoughts on how that could be effectively spent to solicit change.
And it's not really $100. Imagine like 100 million doubloons, but 100
Yeah.
is easy math to do.
Sorry.
So, kind of thinking about adding money to any of the categories, as more positive change that's possible, more promotion of rebates or direct outreach to certain kinds of customers. Keeping it at zero means that it kind of stays what it is. So we can take that question offline rather than having you guys answer this right now, and give Dan a chance to share some of the latest on the templates.
So the right-of-way templates that we've been talking about, we've got some draft designs put together. We've got 3 different options of a very low, which would be kind of our native, our low, and a moderate water use plant palette. And then we've got informal and formal kind of plant schematics. These are based off of a 50% density coverage at maturity. So we're trying to be realistic with the amount of plants we're requiring, and also trying to be realistic with, what's available and not be exclusive with types of plants, right? So we've got a very low water use. So we've got, kinnick, we've got wax currants, a lot of your purple sages, traditional kind of regionally native plants. Next slide. We've got a low water use. And so we've got, blue mist spirea, we've got Russian sage, other various plants. So we've got, typically our different size shrubs, all the way down to ground covers to perennials, if we want to mix those in for color, for habitat. We've got, top dressing, and then we've got, so the top dressing gets into the mulch, or, we're not being restrictive on that. It's just got to be at a density thick enough to, prevent weeds as much as possible and give these plants a fighting chance. Next template. And then we've got our moderate water use, which would be our highest water use kind of plants that we're using in here. So we've got blue grama grass, tufted hair grass, euonymus and burning bush. So we've got a wide spectrum of plants to choose through. And what we'd be asking is, a development could come through and say, we want to do, this template, and essentially that's their building permit, right? So this is that free permit that they would get if they want to go the route of just adopting one of these approved plans. We're working on, like I said, we're working on the irrigation plans right now that'll accompany this. And then before we solidify any of this, we'll have the cost analysis available for folks to look over and inform. But this is kind of the route we're going down right now. So I just wanted to kind of share the draft conceptual drawings with you guys and let you know this is kind of what we're thinking about. The other thing that's in here that we haven't changed in the design is there will be, where appropriate, as you park along the street, accessibility paths through here. So a way for people to, exit their vehicle and get onto the sidewalk versus having to walk through the street. So that's one of the things that we're going to have changed in here. But any other comments off the top of your head or first glance at these?
And Dan, all 3 of these are part of that simplified design approach route, right? And folks can still do their customized approach if they desire.
Yep. We're just hoping that, this might be, help easing some of those tight timelines and the processing of the permits. If someone wanted to take this expedited route, the other route is still available. You can have a customized landscape. As long as it meets chapter 12, you're good to go. It just maybe taking the traditional route with a little bit longer review time.
Dan, on your plant selection for the moderate water use, I would really stay away from anything over 18 to 24 inches in height. That's one of the reasons that, you know, those kind of larger, like the euonymus gets, you know, I mean, its maturity might get 3 or 4 feet tall at the most. We get, you know, get a lot of people that tear that stuff out if it's too tall, you know, blocks the view of the street. Kids kind of pop out of those tall shrubbery, you know, that's all shrub, and they, you know, it's hard to see them on the street. So I would try to keep everything as low as possible, because that's usually the primary reason that the street strip is grass, is because, you know, it does have a lot of activity, and there's a lot of, you know, play out there, and people don't want their cars to be hidden behind them, or, you know, whatever reason, they will grow into the street. So that's one comment.
Okay.
And then the other one would be, I can't see the screen here really clearly, but what's the size? Are you guys going to have a specified size, minimum size for plant material, like when it's installed?
So I think, yeah, right now our stuff says like, you know, 2 gallons for shrubs, and ground covers 18 inches on center. So we've got, we put in there, we do, but we were trying to be realistic. So like, we don't want you to put in a 2 gallon Idaho fescue, right? That could be a 4 inch or a 1 inch if that's all that's available, or not a 1 inch, a 1 gallon if that's all available, that's available. So we're trying to be realistic with those plant requirement sizes, just again to accommodate availability. I think the only thing that is super restrictive right now, and I don't know if it will change, would probably be the street trees. I think they're still requesting the 2-inch caliber tree, but we're not really touching that part of it right now, because that's a separate effort. The one thing that I did want to mention too, and you brought this up kind of, Joe, with the size of plants, is for this example, and this is our typical kind of residential development, we had to choose a size of right of way, right, to exemplify. And so this is based off of it's a 100-foot stretch, but it's like a 7-foot, 8-foot wide right of way. So this also can apply to a commercial plex that might have like a 10 or 12-foot right of way. And at that point, when your dimensions change, you know, you can use overhead broadcast irrigation over 8 feet, but you just have to have a low precip rate, right? So just for the sake for not making a whole bunch of different plans, we're going to put those kind of notes or substitutions in here so that people are aware of it. But you know, in a right of way section that might be 12 feet, and you can get away with some of those bigger shrubs, we might be able to. So maybe, given what you said, it would be important to have like a note or an asterisk in there about, you know, if your width dimensions are, you know, X number of feet, you know, choose, you know, C through F, you know, and stay away from those larger shrubs. Maybe would that be helpful?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
I think at least direct people to that. They don't, because the size of the plant, they're going to plant them, and then in 3 years they're going to realize, oh my gosh, those are way too big. So I think if you were to, you know, even if they're small at the time, limiting of those widths would be good. I think the smaller plant honestly is a better option. I would go 1 gallon, 4-inch, you know, grasses, perennials can go to that size, and 1 gallon for shrubs. A couple of reasons. One, cost, you know, this size of a bed here is 800 square feet roughly. No, 700, I think this which is, but you know, that's a substantial investment right there. That's probably in the, you know, $6-7 a square foot range to do that, what your landscape without the street trees. So, you know, I think with the smaller plant sizes, you get the value savings, but in addition to that, you actually get a healthier, more established plant. You put it, you know, the larger plant, and within a year, it's going to be a 2-gallon size, but it also has a much more substantial root system. So therefore, your cost of watering that thing is going to go down, you know, a little bit quicker than a larger plant that needs to be established a little quicker. And that's generally, and most of the stuff will grow and mature within 1 season to that size. So something maybe to consider on size requirements for the plant.
No, that's awesome. Thank you.
I'm just going to cycle backwards here through these real quick so folks can see the set. My slides will cooperate with me. So this was the moderate use, and we had the low water use. And we started with the very low.
Mhm.
So just kind of checking out that progression again. Any other thoughts on this topic?
I think that's about it for me. I know we got to get to stormwater. So thank you, everybody. I've got good notes here.
Great, Elizabeth. Hang on, let me see if I can get you unmuted.
Sorry.
Go.
So last time we talked about the management program document for stormwater was back at the September meeting, and we kind of went through all of the main sections and described some of the changes and updates that we made to this this document for the new stormwater permit. And so now we were at public feedback that ended mid-October, and then we were also doing kind of a concurrent internal review and revisions to the document. And it's finally finished, and we submitted it to DEQ today. And this, as a reminder, it went to both the stormwater permit for surface waters regulators and also our groundwater underground injection control permit regulators. So it's a kind of an integrated document that covers both of those programs and regulatory permits. We did get some comments, a bunch of comments from a single person, none from current UPAG members, but that's okay. If you didn't get a chance to read it yet, it is available on the city's stormwater website right now. It should be posted at the link there. We can go to the next one. And so today this will mainly just be a kind of an update of where we were for the past fiscal year and our reporting. So as part of that document that got submitted, we also had 2 separate annual reports submitted that were due today. So we had the stormwater report for surface waters, and that was mainly focused on all of the control measures in our stormwater permit and our progress on them, and kind of a bunch of data supplied to DEQ for that. And then on the UIC side for groundwater, UIC again is underground injection control, just as a reminder. That includes all of our monitoring data. So we are required in that permit to take samples at the point of entry to these devices every year and submit that to DEQ. And then we also have a really large digital database of every single facility that the city owns that we have to give to DEQ each year and tell them how many were newly installed and how many were removed each year. And all of that is done in DEQ's online portal, which is a newer system that they have to kind of track and manage all of the state's regulatory requirements. The stormwater side isn't quite yet integrated to that, but it will be at some point. So both.
What is it? We're nearing what, 7,000 like underground injection facilities, so dry wells and drill holes. It's a lot, and those are just the publicly owned ones.
Yeah, so our permit only applies to publicly owned systems, no privately
It's a
owned
lot
on private property.
And we don't collect data, monitoring data on every single one of those. We collect on a representative set of those to figure out what is the quality of the stormwater that's entering these facilities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We can go to the next slide. Okay, and then so now we're going to get into a little bit for the past fiscal year, some of the things that happened in our program and some reporting numbers. So under the stormwater report, MS4 for surface water discharges, the past fiscal year for our code illicit discharge code enforcement cases, we track and manage that every year. So we had 45 complaints that were investigated. 12 of those we considered like true illicit discharge cases where something's getting into a storm drain. And then the other 33 were really construction site complaints related to erosion and sediment control or dust, which are managed kind of under a separate section of our permit than the illicit discharge section. So just to kind of have that breakdown for you guys here. And then about 58% of the true illicit discharge cases that we received the past fiscal year were auto-related leaks, so oil or fuel type of spills in streets. And then this was pretty consistent with what we also had the prior year in fiscal year 22, where we were seeing a lot of auto and fuel related cases. So this kind of helps us figure out where do we need to focus a little bit more on some outreach for this program. And then for on the construction and erosion control side, we had about 125 development permits, which equated to 413 inspections. And we do have a lot of different inspection types and how they can pass or not pass in our database. So anything that basically doesn't receive a full pass, meaning there's something discovered on site by an inspector that could be a potential pollutant issue or discharge, then that would receive either a partial pass or failed. And it does require the inspector to come back and check on it and also escalate kind of what happens each time, depending on how many times something doesn't get fixed. And so we had 135 failed, 64 partial passed, 186 passes, 21 not ready, which usually just means that they were requested to come out, but they hadn't gotten any work started yet. So it's kind of like a voided inspection, and then 7 canceled ones, which could be related to the same reason, or it's being done under a different permit in our database. We have a lot of different permits, and kind of erosion can follow all of them. So we have to keep track of which ones they're under. So that's what we had for the past fiscal year, these numbers. And then getting to some on the outreach side for our stormwater permit, we did start distributing a fact sheet through the building department back in March of this year. And this was really to just get people more familiar with erosion control in general and some of the city codes and things that are allowed and not allowed in the city related to construction projects. And this was to kind of familiarize them before we're going to have some more stringent erosion control requirements under the permit that are going to start next year. So these all went out to basically any kind of small development, single family residential, more as just an information guide. But we do want to start to hopefully model this kind of template into any actual future erosion permit that we may have to meet these more stringent requirements next year. So later in the year, we're going to be looking for more specific feedback from UPAG on these kinds of things. Once we get a couple more developed, have them kind of set up for different kinds of development. But this was going out. We had 255 of them put out between those few months, March through June. And they're still going out right now. So I don't know if anyone here has seen any of them or heard of them yet, but they're getting issued with building permits for single families now. Does anyone have any feedback on that particular one that you see here? We're trying to make it as simple and easy as possible for people to understand with kind of the pre-made drawings and that sort of thing. But all right, we can move on. Okay, now switching to our other report. Because like I mentioned, we have 2 reports due every year. So this was for the underground ejection control systems. So for our monitoring, we have what's called action levels listed in the permit. which basically says if there's any sample that's taken that exceeds a certain numeric limit, then we have to come back and have a list of procedures that we have to go through in order to assess why that was triggered, how to fix it, and kind of coordinate with DEQ on an action plan. So for the past fiscal year, we had 0 exceedances, which is good. We didn't have to do any of that. And then for the update on our database, the past fiscal year, we had 265 either new / or proposed UICs for that time period. And then we had 12 that were closed or decommissioned. Usually this can happen if there's a newer development project and they need to either move certain drainage and right of way around or upgrade them. And then as of, I think it was yesterday, we have 6,625 UICs listed as active. And if you guys do go into our database on the city's mapping page, you can see all of the systems. And if you do look at it, don't get confused. It will say we have more than that because we have a category listed that'll say active or withdrawn. So we keep a record of everything that was ever existing that the city owns. So it will show more than that. But for active ones actually out there and being used, that's the number right now. And then the picture we have is just an example if you haven't seen what they look like. The top photo is a drill hole, which currently aren't allowed in the city standards anymore. They're much deeper systems than the one on the bottom. The one on the bottom is maybe 10 to 15 feet deep and has little weep holes on the side, but the drill holes can go very far down and basically just have a casing on them. So the water will just travel past the casing into the ground. And on the right there, we actually did a kind of a video, I don't know what the camera's called, CCTV camera. We had some utility staff go out and check some of our systems to see what the depth was. And so the top photo, you can see that casing there, and that was already when it was about 27 feet down. Around 29 feet, we got past the casing. As you can see, kind of the natural rock there, and then around 33 feet, that was the total depth on this system here. So it's pretty interesting if you haven't seen what the inside of one looks like yet. It's just kind of a cool video that we have. Are there any questions about the UIC information?
That's definitely the first time I've seen inside one of those. I've seen other kinds of CCTV imagery, but not a UIC. So
yeah,
pretty cool.
Okay, and then looking for future topics that are stormwater related for next year. On the surface water side, we're going to continue to talk about erosion control permitting, inspections, and outreach because we do have that pretty large deadline for the erosion control program that's November 1st of next year. So we're going to be asking for your input on any kind of permitting changes and inspection requirements that we have, and then also how to best kind of outreach all of these changes to the building community and to get your input on that. With that, there will also be code and standard updates that we'll have to make under Title 16 for this in order to have it fully backed and implemented properly. And then another thing we're going to be working on is some illicit discharge, more targeted outreach to businesses. One thing we're looking into is possibly working with the city's business licensing registration program, having more targeted outreach through that method and potentially other ways that we'll look for some input on. And then the stormwater master plan, working on getting that going, hopefully by December. And then some of these UPAG meetings will be focused on master planning, which is again different than the other plan I talked about. Master plan is much more focused on the city's stormwater infrastructure and any needed infrastructure projects and updates into the future. And part of that will also include a little bit of discussion about rates and rate studies. So be on the lookout for that. And then for UIC side, we're currently working on a groundwater protectiveness study with some very smart individuals that are hydrogeologists. And they're going to be helping us with looking at some pollutants and seeing how we may need to make any adjustments to our vertical separation distances for UICs, and also taking a look at what are the best horizontal setbacks for us right now. And this is going to feed into a lot of potential design standard updates in the future. So that'll be another topic. And then as a reminder, our current DEQ underground injection control permit is in administrative extension. It expired back in April and we reapplied, so we are still waiting on that new permit. So once we get that, that could be another UPAG topic to kind of give some updates about what's been added to that and what that means for the UIC program. I think with that, that's all I had, unless anyone has questions for the stormwater topics.
So we've got about 8 minutes left, and we did want to set the stage a little bit for December because it will be our final 2023 meeting. And the idea here, when we started out last December, was that we would have this kind of annual baton pass, reflect on how, what we've heard from this group, not just us city team sharing what we think we heard, but also hearing from team members, kind of having you share some of your takeaways from participation in the process. And also welcoming in new members at the same time. So a bit of a highlight reel, a bit of a, looking forward and what topics would be of most interest as we set and refine that roadmap for the 2024 meeting series, and then bringing in some new faces here. We already have Joe and Trevor have already joined us. We may have a couple more new faces in December. So that's what we have planned, but wanted to set the expectation there. We hope all of you can be there and have some things to share, more time on mics that are not city staff mics, if you will. That sounds good.
Right. It'll also be an opportunity for us to kind of remind everyone these are the topics we've been discussing, and that it'll be good for new members to hear that, but for everybody else, it's good to remind us, what have we been talking about? How does that lead into the discussions we need to have with you, we want to have with you next year? So I am hoping it'll be a really useful exercise for everybody, and an opportunity to pick on some of those topics and offer additional input.
And I did, we don't have these on the calendar quite yet, but I did put down the first Wednesday of the month for January and February. Those are likely save the dates. We're going to try and get some calendar invites out, but because of we've had, a little bit of change in our membership, we want to let the dust settle on that a bit more before we send out those hold the dates. But you'll expect to see those pretty soon. I'm going to stop sharing here too, and then also note, so this 100 million doubloons question, you'll get some information on that post meeting. And the idea there again is just, the input that everybody has been giving along the way this year has really helped kind of refine some of the tactics being discussed and thought through. But this is a chance to just say, okay, given the data, given kind of the summer program stats that Dan shared, thinking forward, what would you suggest as the best focus areas? Great how things are moving. Would you change anything? We talked about the green industry, trainings. We talked about the rebate program. We talked about some of the broad outreach through billboards and other things. Would you keep trying those? Would you change something? So should be pretty quick to fill out. We'll get you that survey link, but just wanted to kind of take the temperature of the room if folks have suggestions there. So look for that link.
And we'll bring that to the December meeting. That'll be a great topic, is to have, that's a great summary, right? Everybody's thoughts on, based on what you've heard so far, where should we focus what percentage of our efforts?
And I will I'll email that link out to everybody too, so folks have it. Any other questions though about December while we're here? Same time, same place. December 6th, I believe it is, Wednesday, 11 o'clock Zoom. We'll have a little bit of a agenda and an outline, but definitely want to hear from all the members who've been part of the team in 2023, and certainly Joe, Trevor, and others who are new faces. Think about, you know, kind of the topics and what's most exciting to you, what's on your mind for 2024.
This is Trevor. I do have a kind of a comment on Dan's presentation. Is now a good time to kind of bring that up? I probably
Sure.
should have mentioned it after he gave it, but you know, I think at least my perception, having only been here twice now, and thank you for allowing me to join you guys, a lot of your efforts are towards new development, and I definitely see that pay off. But I think Dan shared some growth charts that showed a lot of the new development is outside of City of Bend's jurisdiction and into Avion. Do you have a kind of follow up or a fallback to start going back to the older parts and the developed parts of Bend? And I know some of the rebate programs and et cetera were probably geared towards some of those people, but I think new developments, water conservation, low impact turf, et cetera, is paying off. You drive through some of these newer communities and you see a lot less landscape waste, if you will. You know, unnecessary turf, you see that mitigated, but you drive through the older parts of Bend and you see grass everywhere, lawns everywhere, you know, whereas you drive out like off of Cooley Road, I think 18th and Cooley Road, and to me that is one of the best streetscapes for low impact native turf, low water use material that I've seen in town. Just the streetscape looks fantastic. It looks natural. It looks hardy, you know. But you drive through the older parts of Bend and you just see lawns everywhere and grass medians. And do you have a plan to reach out to those areas and start trying to get them to convert?
Yeah, no, great question, Trevor, and thanks for bringing that up. So yeah, we do. So when we did the analysis, one of the reasons there's multiple reasons, but one of the reasons we chose to pursue the landscape code was the cost benefit analysis. I think we showed this in an earlier meeting, so this is good, and maybe we should revisit this just to outline our decision-making process. Was, when we were looking at the cost versus water saved, it was a lot cheaper to implement water savings into a new development, right, than to retroactively convert something. And so the second reason being we prioritized that is we knew it was going to take a lot longer to implement, right? A lot more stakeholders, a lot more internal discussions and processes to work out versus putting together a rebate program. Yes, we do have basically a dual-pronged approach to water conservation as well. And one of those being addressing what does go in new development. Because what we were seeing happen over the last 8 years I've been in this department was, we were dealing with things from the regulatory side after the fact, right? So we were dealing with all the water waste in these neighborhoods. And at that point, it's in and it's expensive to fix, right? And so all this that we've been dealing with over the years really helped us make that decision to prioritize the new development code. To your point, we work with a lot of those existing HOAs where it is very turf heavy. I mean, that was a very traditional landscape in Bend. And so we're currently working on things where we can move outside of, the device rebate per se, on a sprinkler or a controller. So we're moving towards, that turf removal or turf conversion program. We're currently working on the program framework for that. And hope to have something for not only the single family residential customer, but also the larger HOA or commercial customer. You know, obviously scaled differently, but yeah, no, it's a great point. It's not just new development, but you know, that is the point where is easier to make a change and a difference. You know, when we're putting things in the ground versus.
So we probably should note we're past our time, and we appreciate everybody spending their time. Fill out the survey. It actually goes to that discussion. And I just noted, I just pulled up the survey and I noted it doesn't say anything if you go over your $100. So please do your math. And when you put in numbers in those categories, have them add up to 100, not more than 100.
Aubrey,
It
real
would be
quick,
nice if it showed you the math. I think it will give you an error, but yeah, just think about the 100. That's should be relatively easy math. You can kind of do it proportionally. Thank you guys for staying a little extra, a couple minutes over. You'll get a follow-up email. If you have more thoughts, because we chewed on some meaty stuff today. If you have more thoughts on those discussion questions, you know, we can save some time in December or carry on offline and take a look at that survey, and we'll see you in December.
Aubrey, do we still have the Miro board up if people want to leave comments? Or did we
We
move
can make
away
that
from
happen.
that? Okay.
Yeah.
So if anyone has additional thoughts or comments they want to get out of their head while they're thinking about it, we do have a board. Hopefully we can send a link to you and you can put those down so we can consider them for next meeting. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.